Can you check the direction of the mic? La dirección del micrófono. Ah, okay, exactly, yeah. Test sound to see if it is working.
Yeah, it's sound.
There's sound, okay. Okay, we are ready. Thank you very much, everyone. We are going to start with the keynote presentation, the second one of this conference, Media Art Histories Conference, Regenerative 2025 Media Art Histories. It's my pleasure and honor to introduce you to Professor Manthia Diawara. Are we okay? Should we wait? ¿Esperamos? It's right, okay. It's my pleasure again to introduce you to Professor Manthia Diawara. There are many, many things that we can say about his work. He is the director of the African Studies program at New York University. He comes originally from Mali, Africa, spends time in Senegal, in the Middle East, in Europe and the States. He's been professor in other universities in North America, like UC Santa Barbara, which is my alma mater as well. But if I can say some words about him, I would say that
countries were always important. I didn't do that.
Manthia is one of the most interesting intellectuals of our time. He's been able to cross continents, cross cultures, and cross practices, writing, thinking, and creating amazing documentaries. So, as I did yesterday, I will start with a description of one landscape, Manthia. We are in Manizales. This is the center of the coffee region of the country. As you know, coffee is very important for the local and national identity and other Latin American countries like Brazil. What some people don't know is that actually coffee is a plant and a seed that comes from Africa that was domesticated in the Middle East and then came to these places and modify. And today, the landscape in which we are now, it's World Heritage because of the transformation of the coffee plantation. I don't know if you have the time to see around, is UNESCO World Immaterial Heritage of the world, Paisaje Cultural Cafetero. So, the invitation today is to plant the seed, as we did like coffee coming from Africa. Plant one seed that Manthia is bringing, and that seed is AI. But AI not as artificial intelligence, but as African intelligence. Dear Manthia, thank you very much. It's an honor to host you.
Thank you very much, Andres. You're wonderful. I'm really happy to be here, and I'm also a bit nostalgic about what used to happen, because this is Festival of Images, and we used to share our images, Latin America, Africa, the African diaspora, Asia. Some of you recall, for example, I don't know, the Bandung Conference. Some of you recall the Nana Line. But also in the art world, those of us who studied either cinema or literature or art, there were moments where we shared our images a lot, whether it is through Cinema Novo, or Imperfect Cinema, or Third Cinema, or even recently situations, well, actually, when I say that, I should also say the LA Rebellion, the Los Angeles mostly black filmmakers, or African cinema of Samben Usman. So we used to share our images a lot, and we also used to share ideas. We used to share ideas, the pedagogy of the oppressed, Paulo Ferrer, people like that. We used to also share, I'm thinking of a young artist, young compared to me, Paulo Nazareth, who wanted to walk from Brazil all the way to North America, and from there walk to, but travel to Senegal, to the Gorée Island. So your festival made me nostalgic about sharing of images to some extent. What I want to do here is to do two things. I'm talking around a film that I made in 2022, which is called AI, African Intelligence, and how the second point, the ideas of Edouard Glissant informed not only the film, the making of the film, but also some of the ideas that I'm hearing sitting in the room here. Many of them relate a lot to Glissant's notions of opacity, notions of trembling, notions of the trace, and tout monde, basically. So first, before I show you I'm just going to show one clip of the film and then talk to you. And before I show it to you, I'd say, why did I have something called AI African Intelligence? I was invited around at 2020 to Linz, a small town in Austria. They do a festival there called Ars Electronica. And they more or less do what you've been doing here for the last 2 days. They look at technology, they look at AI, and what are the development, and so on. And somehow they invited me. I'm a professor of comparative literature and cinema. My area of specialization is specifically narratology, storytelling and how stories are organized. So they invited me to this festival because they wanted alternative ideas on AI. This is 2020. And I went there just to not be disrespectful, but to, at the same time, show my discontent toward AI, to basically say that the virtual world, actually the only mission it had was to replace the real world. How we can literally push the real world aside and replace it with the virtual world. So I went and said that to the scientists. I thought that would annoy them, or they would say, oh yeah, but he's primitive, he's afraid of science, and so on. Well, guess what? They said, this is interesting, why don't you invite some scientists? And then I did that. They said, this is interesting, why don't you make a film on it? So that's really where this film comes from. The only complication is that when they took me seriously, it became a challenge. It became a challenge because I don't know AI on the one hand, and I'm taking them to Africa. So I said, maybe I should try to find something I do not understand, I do not know, and then make the film on two things that I do not know so that I can learn about them. One, AI, and then two, an African culture that I don't know anything about. And this it's just so happened that in Senegal, where I bought my house on the beach like any bourgeois African, you make money. So buy a house on the beach. So I bought a house, but every night I hear drummings, and I don't know where they're coming from, so it just become part of the environment, this drumming. And I decided to ask people, what is this? Oh, they say it's called Dundup, and it's a possession ritual. I said, maybe I should make a film on this and then see how their way of visiting the spirits and seeing something in the dark could be compared to the way artificial intelligence gathers data and create algorithms and apply them and so on. So, of course, in the film, what we end up doing was to, the scientists that they had invited me to speak to, I invited them to talk about AI. And as a humanist, I was basically at first interested in the biases, including you build data, you use data collected either in China or the United States, and then you create an algorithm and you apply that to the whole world. So the notions of injustice, the notions of equality, I just wanted to explore those, and I wanted the scientists to talk. But I saw many benefits, and the benefits were, among other things, I paid to organize a possession ritual, and the whole village showed up, and they all showed up with the cell telephones, the smart telephones. So as the people were dancing and telling their stories, you see young people from 11 to 15, they're filming it. So they were, in a way, preserving data which I had not paid attention to. I had not realized before that. Another advantage would be something as typical as today, well, in the United States, if you do not have a job and an address and you bill receipts, you cannot open a bank account. So can you imagine Africa? But with AI now, all Africans use their own telephone. They invest money, like in Senegal is Orange telephone. So this is basically your bank. You do not have to go to the bank and show all your receipts. You can just have your telephone with all your investment and your expenses. So the same thing could be said about the startups in Africa, because I brought in many startups. You will see one of the women in the film. These women, or men also, they do startups to make life easier for farmers, for fishermen, for different people, where you go and temperature, what's happening. So yes, there are a lot of positive things that are happening, but there is also this notion of the virtual world still replacing the real world that I was interested in. So that's the film. The ideas that I want to talk about with Edouard Glissant and how that illuminates what's happening in AI, I will get to that later on. So what I want to do is show you about 10 minutes of the film. After that, then I come back and talk to you. So all I have to do is... The powerful countries were always imposing their way of understanding the world on the rest of the world. From the technological revolution to the electronic revolution to the digital revolution, when these movements of science and technology come to so-called non-Western countries, they really come in an oppositional manner. They come to kill, to destroy, to obliterate, to annihilate everything that is non-Western, and to impose on non-Western cultures what this modernity is all about. The non-Western cultures end up being cheated in a sense that they lost their own culture, but yet they will never fully master the culture of the invader, of the colonizer, of the conqueror. Just looking at Merby now, she's dancing. I feel like some higher forces put us in contact.
while they'll fix the network, maybe you can add some words.
Yes, so imagine I am 71 years old now, and Mayor B's son is older than I am. So there is a
How
big
do I tell
confusion.
Mayor B's story?
It's fixed, so I'll tell you about it later.
That's really what I see my role for this film. In the era of digital domination, how do I tell that story? Then DUP and AI. When these two different practices of understanding our world come together, what are some of the unforeseen results that come out of it? D'abord, qu'est-ce que vous pensez d'une DUP, avant même de rentrer dedans?
Alors, le NDUP, c'est une tradition chez les Lébous. Bon, moi, personnellement, ma grand-mère est Lébou.
Oui.
Ma mère connaît le NDUP. Moi, je ne l'ai jamais vu, j'ai jamais vu de séance, mais je sais qu'il y en a même à Yoff, à Dakar, et ça fait partie donc, de la tradition Lébou, et c'est là. Moi je trouve que c'est une belle chose dans le sens où ça permet à ces communautés de s'épanouir donc dans leur culture, et tout ce que je peux faire, c'est juste respecter en tout cas ce rituel-là.
Growing up in Mali, we were very afraid of possession rituals. We call it the devil's dance. My parents, but also the elders, they told us to stay away clearly from these kind of practices. They scared me. That's how I grew up in Mali. In my Western education, I was taught to look at life in a logical manner, 1 + 1 = 2, to be rational. They say all these things were superstitions.
mooy ñu góorgóorlu booloo nekk benn der bu ñuul bi wan Afrika ak ñi nga xamante.
So what I was saying is, I was born in 1953, and Mayor B's son is older than I am. So in the village, some people said she's 115 years old. And those of us Westerners, because I'm also a Westerner, even though Edouard Glissant says that the West is a project, not a geography. This is very important. The West as a project, as opposed to the West as a geography, to Glissant. So those of us who are so-called rational people, we say, maybe she's 95. But in the film, you will see her with a bucket full of water in her head, and she's dancing and going around throughout the whole film for 5 days, 5 nights, every day 3 performances in order to have the complete ritual. And I was filming through that. But what it interests me here, that I think Glissant's philosophy actually philosophy is saying it's a strong word. Caribbean novelist describes it as poesept, that is concept and poetry put together. He calls it le poesept d'Edouard Glissant. So that becomes the poesept, because Glissant says that he is not interested in anything that's not poetic. If you're doing physics, it's great, but do physics that is also poetic. If you're doing geography, it has to have this element of the imaginary, the uncertainty. So this is important for Glissant, and it actually takes us to one of his major points, which I started talking about here, that is transparency. The whole idea of transparency, linearity, systematicity, logic, Plato kicking out of the cave the poets and the mythology and the legends in order to seriously discuss what the world is about. Glissant is trying to bring all of that back. And how is he doing that? This is almost a cliche now. He talks a lot about the time he was in Mexico, and it was with Dos Passos, and they were complaining about the UN and how at the UN, a few powerful countries just decide what should take place in the world. And Glissant said at that time, je réclame le droit à l'opacité. Because his argument is, I do not know myself fully. There are things that I suddenly start doing, and I don't know why I did them. Then how can people sit at the UN and try to define, for example, human right, and then apply that to the whole world? So among them poets, they said, maybe we should form a group and ask the UN to, actually take this into consideration, that it can't decide what's happening in the world by a small group of people, small, powerful countries. And I think, alas, we're seeing a lot of that today since we had our Trump. You're seeing this, how a reality is being invented and imposed on people. So Glissant says he thinks that opacity is probably the first guarantee for diversity. If you want to try to put everything in, you cannot do it through transparency, through linearity, 1 + 1 = 2. You have to take into account that there are other elements that you are not, because science, you have to take out all the complexities in order to reduce your project and in order to create a truth out of that. But you're also taking out some other kind of truth. This is Glissant's argument about opacity. And when I was making a film on him, he kind of jumped at some point in the middle of our discussion. He said, because we usually look at opacity as resistance, which it is, we also look at opacity as obscurity, and it is also that. But for Glissant, it's as important to look at opacity as opacity in the light. Even in the light, there are things that are being hidden that we don't see. We only see what we are trained, our eyes are trained to see. This is one argument for Glissant. And then he also developed something that he called the mangrove poetics. And I get to that, but I think what is quite important, and he says this to both people of African descent, Colombia, United States, Brazil, and so on, to look for the origins not through the DNA. He said, why don't you look for, DNA is a police system. The science takes your blood or something and they decide, well, your ancestors emanate from Mali. Gleason himself will become friend because he said he's from Mali. But so he said, but meanwhile, Africa has been destroyed by slavery, by colonialism, by capitalism, and then you go back from the United States years later, and then you go to one African country, say, you and I, you my brother, the DNA said that we are related. Gleason said, this doesn't make sense. He said, you are related to a person when you have the same kind of poetic identification, sensibility. If you have sensibility with a person, that person can be your sister or your brother, but not because the DNA said that you are related. And this used to put him in a lot of arguments, but Gleason loves those. So after opacity, what I want to get to is this Gleason, when we were all very busy criticizing the Anthropocene, how the man became the center of the world, and meanwhile destroy the world. And I have to make a little parenthesis here, because I'm making it sound like Gleason's ideas are unique to Gleason, but it's part of the Caribbean and probably, I would dare say, part of the America's sensibility. When I was a student, we used to read about the negritude movement. Some of you have heard negrismo. Some of you have heard of this, some not. But the argument in that negritude by Aimé Césaire, Léopold Sédar Senghor, Léon Damas, one from Africa, one from Martinique, and the other one from Guyana. It's a Francophone movement. But they were very interested in nature. They were very interested in what they said, flora and fauna. They say you cannot define either African identity or Caribbean identity, American identity, without the flora and the fauna. Because to them, the landscape is a character. It's not just something there that you can, but again, maybe my translation is wrong. They call it le paysage. Le paysage est un personnage. This is what they will say, and I'm translating it as landscape is a character. And the feeling of that character is very important, and it brought Gleason to theorize another notion that became very, very important in art. That is the poetic of trembling, poetic de tremblement. So literally, Gleason would say that they have a mountain in Martinique that they share with other places, Le Mont Pelé. And Mont Pelé had eruptions. That's very historic in the area. And for Gleason, and first for the negritude movement, but before the negritude movement for other writers, the landscape was trying to tell them something, and they were not hearing it. And for Gleason, of course, this trembling is communicating a message. The local, Merci. I was talking about poetic de tremblement. And for Gleason, think for the Negritude poets also, because when I was growing up again in Mali, one of the poems that we all used to love to recite by heart by Birago Diop, a Negritude poet, was « Écoute plus souvent les choses que les êtres, la voix du feu s'entend, entend la voix de l'eau ». So to summarize it, they will say, look, listen more often to things than to people, because the voice of fire can be heard, the voice of water can be heard, and the voice of the wind can be heard, because our ancestors are not dead. They're part of those things. I think it's translated in English as souffle, souffle like breath, S-O-U-F-F-L-E, souffle, so something like that. But what Glissant poetic of a trembling is that maybe we can go back to and learn these languages, the languages of water, the languages of the wind, and the languages of the air, and maybe this through poetry, through legends, through mythology, can actually become remedies to the Anthropocene. And this brings me to the other idea that include trembling. Glissant calls it the poetic geomorphism, geomorphic poetics. Geomorphic, geography, geology, and all this, the things that are happening under us and the languages that are saying. And people used to base their life on these stories. Glissant said, so first of all, when I go to geomorphism, he calls it in French, pensée naïve. It's a naive thought. It's a superstition if you want. But this naive thought, which will include legend, myth, then also art and poetry, the kind of things that were kicked out of the cave, basically, if we bring them back, I mean, even for my generation, and probably today with the clip that you saw here, in my area, people, if you read a big novel, let me give you an example that probably will make things simpler. A big novel like Things Fall Apart by Chinua Achebe. Chinua Achebe comes home and he sees that the banana tree, somebody cut it. And he said, who killed the banana tree? Because they talk to geography, the land, as human being in many ways. But the point I'm trying to say here is that with even my generation in Mali, people actually do not do anything without creating some kind of aesthetic contract with nature, with the environment. I mean, my area we have that is called Soninke, Diawara area. We have about 14 villages. And I'm sure they all started one after the other because two brothers or something happened and you leave and you go and settle someplace else. That's the part, the settling part that interests me. When you go there, you have to form a pact, either in a specific area, either with trees or with a mountain or with a river bend, whatever it is, you form a pact and you decide to always go there, make a sacrifice in order to protect that place. Now, all these things, the ideas still are there, but they have been desecrated in many places. When people talk about immigration, they talk about immigration in terms of economics, which is very true. But they don't talk about how people have actually broken the aesthetic contract that they had with the environment, the language that they used to have with the environment. They do not talk about this, and this is quite important to them. So the geomorphism in this sense, which make life more complex as opposed to transparent, become very important to Gleason toward the end of his life. And if you want a book that could summarize this, that's eloquent in talking about it. It's a book called Une nouvelle région du monde, because he really wants us to leave this world mentally, in terms of the imaginary, to move to another world where we are relearning the languages of the environment. Not as men saying, I'm going to do all these things around me, but as equal elements in the environment. So Gleason said that, but since I have short time, let me get to another point here. Yes, so sharing our images, I want to go back to the theme of the conference. It's quite important to me because Gleason says that we need to have solidarity of intuition. We need to have a solidarity of intuition. Why? Because in a room like this, Gleason argues, each person has an intuition, and they say it's private, it's mine, only I know about this. But he said, if only you were to share it, you'll be surprised to find out that the same intuition is being taught, not only in this room, but by somebody in Bogota, in Bamako, in Rio, all over the world. And then if you share these intuitions, then we have a kind of solidarity of intuitions. And we could stop some people that we do not like too much, that I have already mentioned in this classroom here. So thank you very much. I started. So, thank you. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you. Thanks. Thank you.
So life has given me the opportunity to speak. While I learn to do that meaningfully, I invite people who really have things to say. And the most meaningful thing is that this wise man who has a lot of things to say is what he's saying is, let's listen to the world. Let's listen to the water, to the fire, to the environment. It's been an illuminating presentation, and I just don't want to leave the room without some interventions, comments, because I think this is a unique presentation. You know that we prepared this with all our enthusiasm and heart, and now we need something back, right, to keep the energy flowing. Yeah, okay.
Thank you for your wonderful presentation. I'm very curious about the term right to opacity by Glissant. And I want to hear more about your opinion about this. I have a couple of students that are working with this concept. And one of the ways they try to address it is about, this ability of maybe the capacity of the colonized to know the colonizer, but how the colonizer will never have the ability to know the colonized fully. And so one of the ways my students are thinking about this right to opacity is how to deal with images. And so one of my students is thinking about making this documentary and thinking about ways in which he can hide the transparency of showing images about other peoples and respecting that. So kind of like a protocol of what to show. But I think the right to opacity is much more complex than that, as you showed. And I want to know and hear you speak about your film, this beautiful film that you showed us, because there's a lot of things that we can see as outsiders from, I forgot the name of the woman as she's dancing. Manthia. So I don't know if you have, it's kind of like a comment, or if you could speak to that.
Right.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's a great question because, so when Glissant says, je demande le droit à l'opacité, yes, on the one hand, he's thinking about relation between colonizer, colonized. But probably the anthropologist and the native. And his argument is when they come to Colombia, they learn certain things, they know your language, they know your food, they know your religious practices, and then if you say yes to all of that, vous êtes comme ça? Oui. Et comme ça? Oui. So they say right away, this is Glissant's explanation, not the only one. They will say, tu vois, je te comprends. You see, I understand you, I know you. So comprendre for Glissant is a French word where he put a hyphen between con and then prend, c'est comprendre quelqu'un. So Glissant said, no, you don't understand me. So opacity in that sense works well, but also the part that doesn't work in your student's example is that the native knows something that the colonizer does not know. Because in Glissant's mind, in relation, all the elements are equal, the visible and the invisible. The native too does not know themselves, let alone to think that, because otherwise the opacity would not work. He says, I don't like the broccoli, but I don't know why I don't like broccoli. So I just have to accept that as part of my opacity. So this is what Glissant is trying to do, but you're right, it's been attractive to the art world to use this because we are also going through a moment of decolonial, of resistance, and so on. So whatever theory comes up, they want to appropriate it and put it inside. Whereas Glissant is really not talking about colonizer and colonizer, like one is high and one is low. To Glissant, when we meet, I have to come toward you by hesitating, by trembling, in order to create an opacity, a solidarity, a kind of relation with you that's not based on me coming as the American or the Colombian and then meeting you. But I hesitate a little bit, you hesitate a little bit tremulously, and we begin to know each other and we begin to share our opacity. This is what Glissant is trying to say. Yeah.
Thank you. So we have time for 2 more questions. Probably better if we take the 2 questions and then give like a general answer. I can see hands here, or...
Andres, okay. Hey, thank you, Manthia, very much. Yes, in this side of the room, the other end.
Oh, that's it.
Yeah, thinking on a continuation to what was mentioned before, in relation to creolización or mestizaje in the horizon of technology, obviously, because this is the context. And I don't know how to go with it because I don't want to sound as fearful, but we know these algorithms are precisely trying to even tokenize that opacity. This is their biggest goal. They want to reach this realm of the what you call a superstition. Machines are striving to get there also. I celebrate this because it's related to creolization, mestiçage. And thanks to your seminars before, I came to a concept called tech syncretism. The syncretism applied to technology. You know, most of these communities survived through syncretism. So it's related to creolization, or to this fact that you don't need to oppose colonizer to colonized, or black and white, or the strong oppositions, but to kind of celebrate this coming together, or this mestiçage. And I am not fearful of what is coming up with technology. So yeah, I want to know what you think, if you can make sense of what I just said. I don't know if it's easy, but yeah, I appreciate your words and your presentation, and I'm happy to hear you again.
Right. Yeah. So in many ways, Glissant coming out of negritude movement, and negritude is really, it's hard to just compress all these things quickly, but whether you're talking about negritude movement, the negrismo in Latin American countries, or Harlem Renaissance in the US in the 20s, these were all moments when the formerly colonized people or enslaved people wanted to speak for themselves. They didn't want to be subjects of sociology or anthropology. They wanted to have their own voice and talk about their own lives in many ways. So I think creolization that you mentioned comes out of that. And Glissant did use creolization for a long time until he published a book called Le Discours Entier, the Caribbean Discourse, published, translated by Michael Dash. And unbeknown to him, after the book came out in the Caribbean, the young generation started something that they call le mouvement de la créolité. So this is really interesting. I think in Brazil, Abdias de Nascimento also started things like this. But what is interesting about it is that there are actually duplications of negritude. They denounce la negritude. Whereas if you look at la créolisation, it's a process that is never ending. So Glissant had a big problem with the movement, the Creolite movement. He said, you guys have essentialized it, you have fixed it. It's a process, it's an ongoing process, it never ends. But what's interesting in the question is that, and I was also listening to this all along in the presentations here when they talk about AI, you know, Glissant always said, le lieu est important, le lieu est incontournable. You know, your location is unavoidable. You have to think of this, but don't close it. You have to think, you say, agis dans ton lieu et pense avec le monde. So use your space, your particular, but use it to think with the world, to open yourself to the world. So never stay with closed totalities. You have to always be in conversation with the world. This was very important. And at some point, Creolite movement said, no to Africa, no to France, we are just Caribbean. So that would have been okay if they had not closed the door to any kind of open discussion with the other people. I think that's what's happening. You see, agis dans ton lieu et pense avec le monde in many ways. But I know I can't go too long with this guy.
It's fine.
Yeah.
Time for one brief question, please.
Thank
Try
you
to be
guys.
brief. We have 4 minutes
Sure.
to finish on time.
Appreciate it. Okay, thank you very much. I enjoy and I love your perception about the map is not the territory, no, the causal relations with the environment, the milieu. In that sense, we are today in this kind of colonization of the sensorium, no? The sense through the mediation of technology, because the technology is only one. We don't have a techno-diversity or that create different approach from our geographical position and intuition, no? That is the cunning of each one for how we resolve technical solutions from our own perspective. In that sense, I want to ask you a question from your own cosmological perception, because we have these aspects in this colonial sensorium that is something that I want to know in future is going to be mediated by science. Science is going to tell me how is the new galaxies that we're going to discover it, and it's a representation of that. But it's some aspects that is something that is the now unknown, that I never going to know, but at least it's part of this intuition that you mentioned in your talk and it's putting in your film. Very beautiful. So what do you think about this characteristic of the now unknown that is, I relate them when you say about this kind of blackness in the middle, you know, that is something that you're never going to know, but it's necessary, and it's more necessary today, especially with these aspects of mediation and sensorium. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So in many ways, I teach a class called Relation with Capital Art, and then I colon and I say the poetics of difference and equality. This is really the hardest thing, the poetics of difference. So yes, we are always, you know, we don't ask permission to relate to people. We're always relating to them, whether we know it or not. And what is the impact of that? And again, there is a cliché glissant that I can just throw at you, where he says, "Je peux changer en échangeant avec l'autre, sans me perdre ni me dénaturer." I think this is quite important. I can, you know, when I was growing up, a Muslim boy, the whole dilemma, that's why they didn't want me to get close to this ritual. You know, if you're Catholic or if you're Muslim, even though they have their own possession, because I showed this film in Abu Dhabi, and then I said, well, I bet you guys don't know anything about this. They said, no, we do. I said, oh, you do? I was really excited, but we're not supposed to talk about it. so my curiosity, but the point is, you don't want to touch the other person because you do not want to be contaminated. This is my word, my vocabulary, not glissant's, because glissant said contamination is okay. So you do not want to be contaminated, so you stay away from the other culture. But glissant said a religion can learn from another religion, but because monotheism is such that actually, they are the biggest problems of separation. If you believe in several gods, then you can consult each one of them for solution for different things. So I'm already doing something that will be profanation, blasphemy in my culture. So to say several gods, that whole word. But I think what is happening is that Glissant says, you know, I was interviewing him on the boat, the Queen Mary, from Southampton to Brooklyn, New York. We have 5 days on the ocean. I was interviewing him, and then I'm coming from post-structuralism. I'm coming from people who are anti-essentialists, this. And then he says, je peux changer en échangeant avec l'autre, ça me perd. I said, then he said, you always can keep your essentiality. So I'm worried about my film, and I don't want Glissant to be considered as an essentialist. So I try to correct him. He said, no, j'ai bien dit son essentiality. So I left him alone. Because I'm coming with my baggage of a person who is supposed to understand Foucault or Derrida and so on, and I'm trying to make sure Glissant is not looked in a bad light. He said, no, j'ai bien dit son essentialité. He said, I said what I said. He said, you can relate to the other, learn from the other, change from the other, and you too changing the other
without losing yourself. You're still you, augmented with something else, but the you is there. He said that. And I think that's what is also interesting in your point, and thank you for the question. Yeah.
Please, let's close with a round of applause that can be heard from Africa.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. It's wonderful to have you here. Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you. I was very nervous. You're very kind. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Muy bien, muchas gracias. Tenemos esta pequeña pausa para un almuerzo liviano y los esperamos a la 1:45 en la medida de lo posible para nuestra última conferencia de esta jornada. Muchas gracias y que disfruten ese almuerzo liviano.